Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Headstrong podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Mills. I'm super excited today because I have another former professional tennis player on with me, but this lady is awesome, and I'm really excited for her to tell you a little bit about herself. I have Sunitha Rao on. Welcome, Sunitha.
Thanks for having me, Danielle. I'm excited to speak with you.
Yes, I am so excited to dive into so many different things. But before we even do that, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and kind of how the abbreviated version of how you got to where you are today?
That I'll try to abbreviate that as much as possible. So today I live in Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a full-time job with a global biopharmaceutical company, and I work in financial planning and analysis. I also have kind of a side hustle. It's a little bit more than a side hustle now, but I have to balance it with my full-time job. I have a real estate company. I am a real estate investor. I purchase distressed investment properties and then fix them up and get long-term tenants in for the most part. And real estate and investing and improving my financial circumstances is a really big passion of mine. Helping others is do the same is also something that I'm very passionate about. So this is kind of like my third retirement plan, I guess. So I have the job, I have the business, but prior to this, I, as you mentioned, was a professional tennis player. I turned pro at the age of 14 and then played until I was 23. When I left the sport at 23, I knew nothing about the outside world. You know, I had a sixth grade education. I had done nothing except eat, sleep, and breathe and play and compete in my sport for my entire life. From the time I was like 5 years old, that's the only thing I knew. So having to transition basically in my mid-20s into air quotations normal life, you know, was a really big challenge. And I learned so much from having to do that, and so many lessons that I learned from my sport have really helped me not only transition into normal life, but then turn into a successful investor, a successful entrepreneur, and a successful corporate America citizen, I guess I could say.
I love that. We're definitely going to dive into all of those things because I think so many companies and businesses don't understand, like, as a professional athlete, like those skill sets really do transfer over. And it's kind of scary when you're retiring because you're like, what am I going to do next? And at the time, you don't really know what to do. And it's crazy. But I want to take it back to, like, how did you even get involved into tennis? What did that look like? Was it your parents? Like, tell us a little bit about that story of how you even got into this.
100%. Yeah. So I was destined, I guess, to play my sport. It was a choice that honestly was made for me well before I was born. So both of my parents are Indian. My father grew up in India and was a soccer player, recreational soccer player. He played in college, and then he wanted to play for the English Premier League, this, that, and the other, and his dreams were never realized. And at the same time where he was like trying to pursue a soccer career, there were two really prominent tennis players that came up in India. They were in the same town that he grew up in. So he was able to see them kind of living this like glamorous, successful life. And it was a life that he had wanted. So seeing someone else in another sport do that, that was when it kind of kicked in for him. And he was like, yeah, my kids are going to play tennis. You know, and so this was like in the 70s. I wasn't born until like 10 or 15 years later, but like he is clearly an example of long-term strategic thinking. So I was born like in the mid 80s, and then we were born in Jersey. My dad, from the time I was really young, like had me active. I was like 3-4 years old running around the block with him. I had one of my earliest memories is having like a little plastic racket and a foam ball because I was too small to actually play tennis or have a tennis racket. And I'd be just like smashing the ball around the kitchen and like 3 years old running around, like being just an absolute nightmare to my mother, I bet. So that was kind of how that started. And then by the time I was 5, my dad was like, okay, we have to move to Florida to train full time. And so like, let's just stop and think about this for a second, because like, no child has promise. I mean, okay, there are promising children and talents at the age of 5, but to like pick up and move to another part of the country so that your kid can train full time at that age is a little crazy. It's just like insane.
Oh, 100%. Like, I love hearing that story from you because mine was very similar. For me, he had me move when I was 9, turning 10. It's like, we're just going to move to Florida now because we're going to do this. And I'm like, okay, because I don't know
Yeah.
anything else. And you're 5. So you're like, I'm just going with the flow. Like, this is fun. And then everything changes, right? Because then you end up,
Yes.
tell us what happened when you got to Florida. Like, what happened then?
I mean, I had kind of like a halfway normal childhood for a little bit of time. Like I went to a normal elementary school, this, that, and the other. But by the time I was in 5th grade, I needed to train more, 9, 10 years old, about the same age, right? And so my dad took me out of normal schooling, put me in a school where I could leave after 4 hours of school a day, you know? So I would like do my core subjects in the morning, leave at noon, and then train the rest of the day. So like even though I went to school until 6th grade, like I wasn't in like full schooling and after 4th grade. And that like that concept is completely insane. Like you are not training children to be successful in life at all in taking that route. You know, you're training them to be a meal ticket.
I guess that's one way to look at it. I mean, looking back at it, it really all paid off. But,
It did.
he saw a vision that like he had that in his head. And it's really cool because that's a very not the American way of doing it,
Or
because
even the Asian way of doing it. My
True.
parents are Indian. We're supposed to be like in school, being educated. We're supposed to be doctors.
But he must have saw so much promise within you. And I think it's really cool that he knew at that time, like, okay, this is the level of effort it's going to take to get to the next level, and made that sacrifice, kind of not caring about what the plan B may be. Like, this is just going to work. And you just kept going. I mean,
it's pretty lucky that I was exposed to that, because when you dive into life as an adult, a lot of times you have to take on endeavors where that is the only way to succeed. There's no chance that you can fail. You can't think that there's a chance you can fail. You just have to go and put yourself into it 110% and believe that it will come to fruition. So
100%. Would you say that your dad was kind of acting as a coach too, or did he like leave it in the hands of the coaches, or was he always in the background, like kind of coaching you at the same time?
He was like the stage mom. all the time. Like I'll have friends who come up to me now and be like, I remember your dad when you were like 7 and he was screaming across 4 courts. I'm like, okay, we're moving on right now. Okay, next subject.
Oh yeah. No, I was just curious because, with tennis, so many parents become like ultimate tennis parents, and they are the coach. And even though there are other people that are coaching you, it's like they have the final say. So when it comes to like that relationship, would you say that like was he like the tough coach that would like break you down, but then build you up, like that type of coach? And like, did he instill that type of like confidence and toughness within you? Or would you say that came from somebody else?
He instilled the toughness because there's no other way, honestly, to make it through that life without it. So that relationship is actually pretty complicated. In the sport, in many sports where you have especially young women who are able to make money at a young age, there is an immense amount of pressure, both on the child, the woman, as well as the family. And so in some situations that can really bubble over into like a pressure cooker type of situation. And the resulting consequence is that there is a lot of abuse that takes place. I mean, I know like you probably know a lot of friends who went through that growing up. I certainly did. And I was one of them, so even though like I definitely learned a lot from the sport, there are definitely like challenges I had to overcome, because he was very much of like the break you down, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, in like almost a very literal way, and I think developing the confidence coming back from that, it's really taken a long time, and it's still something that is challenging, I think. And I think we're going to talk about confidence more later, but I think that even like the most confident people have what they deem to be their limitations and kind of cracks in their armor. And to think that anyone doesn't have that is such a falsehood. It's just kind of understanding where those limitations are, trying to educate yourself and doing the work to overcome them. And then also just kind of knowing what you're capable of, because when you're developing that confidence, it's the barrier is like the doubts in your mind. But if you have facts that kind of can overcome those doubts, you know, like, I can't succeed. What do you mean you can't succeed? You've done X, Y, and Z. So it's understanding how to fight those voices in your head that can really make the difference. And that's kind of, I think, where that came from, and then that confidence for me came from. And then also just finding good people over time who really believed in me, you know. And at first I'd be like, what, like, you're crazy, why would you, what do you see here, why are you doing this, why are you being so nice? You know. But after time, you kind of learn to accept it, and after more people are like good to you and believe in you, you kind of learn to lean into that. So that's what the process was like for me.
Wow, definitely. I think that's so interesting that you talk about the importance of having somebody that believes in you and values you, because I can say, like, for myself, I had so many different types of coaches just growing up, and some were the type that were very like intense, aggressive, like Eastern European style, like yell at you,
Yeah.
borderline attack you. I mean, they weren't, not never physical, but just like that. It was like training through fear.
Yes.
And the fear of, you know, if I lose or if I miss or if I do this. And then I loved that I had like a little bit of a transition. For about 2 years, I worked like exclusively with just Nick Bollettieri. And that was the polar opposite of anything else I've experienced. And I was really young when I worked with him, and he was the type of coach that really instilled so much belief in the player, and it's instilled like so much value, and was like, I believe in you, you can do this. And he was the ultimate cheerleader. And I just remember being like, wow, I can do anything. But imagine like all those other coaches, like they really like chip away at you as a person, and they can really impact you. But what I found, and I don't know if this is the same for you, that when I've come out of tennis and been in the real world, there's not too many situations I face that are as challenging or as tough as those were. So I usually come out on top and being like very good when other people are like, this is so hard. And I'm like, this isn't hard, you know, like
same
that kind of thing.
100%. When you have to overcome like those very real fears and obstacles, comparatively speaking, a lot of things in life are much easier. You just kind of, you're like, okay, well, I've dealt with stuff before, I'll deal with this, moving on.
Definitely. And just like the ability to handle pressure or handle adversity now, I mean, like, would you say in your experience now, like how you handle a pressure situation, or when you're dealing with an obstacle in your career, or even in your, you know, business that you deal with, do you find that you handle that better just based off of your preparation of all those years of having to deal with immense pressure and having to push through?
100%. I mean, I think there's like an adaptation period whenever you handle a new set of obstacles, because you're like, what is even happening? You know, you have to readjust like that paradigm, that mental framework. But once that's done, it does get much easier. Like, I normally have about 1,500 things going on at one time. I have my job, which is demanding. I like have an Airbnb in my rental portfolio, and people are like, the heat's out, you know, like I have trees falling down on my property somewhere else. I have like this happening, and like, I own all of this. I have to make this happen. You know, I have to make this work out. And you just learn to adapt, because you're used to being in the situation where you feel like your coaches and everyone around you makes you feel like it is life or death if you win or lose this match. And you have all this other stuff happening around you once you leave the sport. But you know what? It's not life or death. No. You know, it's hard. Not going to tell you it's not hard, but you don't have that same feeling.
100%. Well, what I want to talk to you a little bit about, because I'm really excited about this piece, is kind of about your whole like Olympic experience. Like, hello, like you got to be an Olympian. That is so cool. There's very few people that I know that personally have got a chance to do that and do it at such a high level. Can you talk to us a little bit about what it was like to learn that you were going to be a part of that team, and that whole experience, and just what it was all about?
That was just like the craziest week of my life, attending the Olympics. It's kind of strange, because like, you know, in tennis, the Olympics aren't like this prized, glorified, like pinnacle like it is maybe in like sprinting or swimming, where you train your entire gymnastics, yes, where you train your entire life for like the Olympic trials and to make it onto that stage. You know, we have the slams. That's really what's bigger for us. So for me, like, it was amazing, but it was more incredible for me to watch the intensity of these athletes who, like, I say I've done nothing but train my whole life. So have they. But the impact of this event is so much larger on them because they may never have another chance. So they've been training 20 years for like what, maybe 20 seconds to actually come together mentally, physically, with the muscle memory and all the years of training, and just pray it all shows up at the same time and they can leave their best effort on the mat, in the cage, wherever they are, so to witness that was really, really next level. And I'm not gonna lie, I think I might have been a little bit thankful that that wasn't me, because there's so much pressure in our sport. I can't imagine having to do that in another sport where a lot of them don't even make money like day in, day out. Like they have to rely 100% on endorsements, whereas like we would have prize money at least, and so like between like the monetary situation, the struggle, the years of training, and like that one moment in your life to shine, it's truly mind blowing.
Yeah, that's a really great point because, like you said, tennis, we are so fortunate to be playing almost all year round. And these Olympic athletes, it's like once every 4 years, if that, and it's so much pressure. But was it like really cool just being surrounded by so many different athletes from all these different countries? And like, I'm sure you maybe have gotten a chance to see people you even looked up to or anything like that. Like what year was that?
That was 2008. So that was in Beijing, and it was, the whole thing was just so crazy. So I think the other thing is like, as like a person who's like in normal life now with a job and stuff, and like I have this intensity that I approach things with. That's just like how I am. And that people are like, you're crazy, you're this, you're that, because they
don't get it.
Yeah. But like comparing like where I am, especially now that at a level where people say I'm air quotations crazy, to like seeing the level of dedication and intensity that it really takes to succeed, to be like truly the best at what you do, is just, it's not the same, And so in some way, it almost felt like home to be around people who are a large group of people who are like outside of your sport, who are outside of the culture that but we're so similar in so many ways. It was really cool. And just the overall energy of like the entire village, with so many people who were so dedicated and just so driven. It's unparalleled.
That is incredible. I wish sometimes I may have had the chance to go. I'm Puerto Rican and I could have chosen to play for Puerto Rico. And if I had done that, there was a chance I possibly could have gotten to play in one of the Olympics, but I always played for the US versus Puerto Rico. And I've looked back sometimes like, like maybe I could have got a chance to go, but it's just cool getting a chance to talk to you and kind of like hear about that experience. It just seems really, really awesome to get a chance to do that. But in your mind, because, sometimes other people put like accomplishments on you and in their mind, they're like, that's her greatest accomplishment or she's known for this. But in your words, what would you say, do you feel like is your greatest accomplishment in tennis or in anything actually?
I think I have two. One would be professionally. So that would be like starting my real estate business. When you leave the sport without an education and with like basically serious self-esteem issues due to like years of like traumatic experiences, it's one thing to go into a job where you have people telling you what to do and like you have like this track and you just do the same thing everyone's doing and like you don't really have to think about it and you just try to work hard. But then when you leave that and try to start your own business, and all of a sudden everything's on you, and that's when like the mindset work becomes really important, because you are the only thing stopping yourself or your business going from point A to point B, so you need to be able to show up like the person you need to be, like the CEO, like the person who has it all together, so that other people believe in you, so that your team believes in you, blah, blah, blah. So to grow from that person who was ridiculed for being dumb, not because I was dumb, but because I was uneducated through a set of circumstances that weren't necessarily 100% even my own decisions, and to like just have people belittle you, I had coaches abuse me, like I had just like, I went through the gauntlet, and to come out and be like, you know what, screw all of you. like I am going to succeed on my terms, like that was a really big step. And I think the other part is like my personal accomplishments. So like when you grow up in like a violent dynamic in a violent environment and like you're isolated, there's so many things happening where it's really hard to not only learn who you are, but then to like build stable, fulfilling relationships, whatever that looks like. And that's something that I struggled with, you know, right? I left my parents' home when I was 19, like got restraining orders, all of that stuff. And I would like push people away. I was like a roller coaster, super volatile, like high one day, super nice, super engaging. The next day I'd be like, oh my God, like get away, like hot head temper. Like it was just everywhere. And so to kind of like learn from that and grow from that to being a person where I can kind of establish these like really close bonds with other people and know that like I have family. I might not have blood family very I have like my brother and I are super close, but like beyond that, I don't have blood family, you know, and to have this support system of people who also care about me and who I care about, and we're just like there for each other as though we are related. Like that is probably my other major accomplishment that I'm proud of.
No, I love that. I love just hearing like from your own words, like what you feel were your greatest accomplishments, and to kind of just talk a little bit about like the relationships thing, you know, like what advice would you give to somebody who has struggled with trauma or abuse and they're trying to kind of get over that and be able to make good lasting relationships in the future? Like, has anything that you've done worked really well that you'd like to share?
I think, well, first it's an evolving process. So it's going to constantly change. And I think talking to someone, having outlets is really important. So really real talk. Last year was one of probably the hardest years of my life. Drifted away from therapy for a few years and then had some personal relationships that kind of fell apart, you know, and I realized that I was my biggest demon. And there were, as I got closer to people, like especially in romantic relationships, like there were a lot of things that would come out from my past that didn't really allow me to really lean in like I should, because I was still scared, you know, and all these other things. So I think understanding that the nature of healing is going to change, and healing doesn't necessarily mean that it's peaceful. Like it can be just so turbulent. Like last year I was a disaster trying to like get through a lot of things, you know, and but that's a part of the process too, and that's okay. And I think the other big thing that I've really learned is that not everybody goes through these experiences. And when you do go through a traumatic experience, it's for a lot of different circumstances, you're almost conditioned to minimize it. Like it's not that big of a deal. And sometimes that's needed to get through it. Mm-hmm. But in time, you have to give it the gravity that it deserves, because otherwise it's not, it's going to be so hard to overcome. Like it's okay to be like, I went through some shit and it was bad and it messed me up for a while, but you know what? Like I'm here now, you know, and there's a lot to be said for that. You know, you really have to learn to own the fact that it was bad and it was hard and it's not something that a lot of people go through, and that's okay, you know. And don't let other people, like I've had other people try to minimize my experience, and I'm like, I've learned to be like, no, like this was not okay. And just because you didn't go through it, you can't empathize with it, that's fine, but don't you dare take like the gravity and how much this impacted me. Don't try to take that away from me. It's not yours.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's so crazy that people would try to minimize somebody else's experience that they haven't lived through and gone through themselves. That's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of that. Would you say that that experience last year was probably one of the biggest obstacles you've had to overcome in your life? Or would you say that there's maybe something else that was even bigger than that, that you've had to overcome?
I think just overall overcoming the dynamics of not knowing a different life through my sport and not knowing a different life personally where people actually cared about you. I think those were the two biggest dynamics to overcome so that I could build a normal life and relate to other people. I think last year was just a layer of the onion that you need to peel away in order to like evolve into the next and better phase of who you are and who you can be. But like the biggest thing is really like those deep seated issues that sometimes occur when you're really young, because those stay with you. Like they don't, unless you actually do the work and be like, there's something here and I'm going to pluck at it and like take it away. It stays, and that's what's hard.
No, definitely. What advice would you give to parents of kids or people who are considering having kids that want their kid to be a high level professional? Is there a way that they can still be super focused and work really hard, but not have all of the other bad parts that really affect that kid as they grow up?
Yeah, I think so. There are definitely many examples of like healthy families and healthy relationships. So I don't know, like if you remember like the Kleisters, like Kim Kleisters, and so Kim
Of
had
course.
Kim had a younger sister who is my age, and we got very close when we were in the juniors and stuff. Like she was my first friend when I traveled overseas for my first trip, and so I think like seeing how her family kind of operated was, at least from what I could see, was really interesting because they seemed like parents first, and I think that's the really big like takeaway, because it's gonna feel like life and death to your kid no matter what. There's so many matches when I was 8 years old, and like I just wanted to throw up in like the bathroom before the match because I was so scared and so nervous. And that was like the norm, like shaking. And that's not really normal for an 8-year-old. Like let's make that perfectly clear, And so in order to be a successful athlete, you need to be a whole person too. Like I don't think I reached my full potential because I had so many demons I was battling at the same time, and if you can at least make sure that they are confident as a person, that they are like whole and they know that they are loved and their self-worth is not reliant upon on their performance within that competition, that will make a huge difference, not only in who they are as a person today, but the adult they will grow into and the athlete they will be.
Love that. Wow, that was so good. Oh my gosh. Well, let's talk about what you're doing now, which is actually really exciting. This real estate business that you have is awesome.
Thank
Can you
you.
talk a little bit about like how you got into that? Like what made you want to start this company and kind of your purpose with doing it?
So my mission with starting the company was to be able to more greatly influence my financial future and give myself the freedom to where I wouldn't need to be dependent upon a job. So when I got out of college, I got a job at a Fortune 500, I think they were Fortune 500 company, yeah, in like their rotational leadership training program. So it was basically like a management acceleration program. It was great, and there were so many things that really helped me both professionally and personally going through that. However, that was also where I learned how political corporate America could be and how it wasn't as much of a meritocracy as I'd hoped. And I was used to a more of a meritocracy from being an athlete and that whole lifestyle, right? And so that led to me feeling like very trapped. I was just so miserable because I was like, I am capable of more, but they don't see it because of X, Y, and Z, And I was like, do I need for them to see it? Do I need for this person who's never been outside their home state of New Hampshire to tell me my value? No. Like, I was like, this cannot happen. This is not okay. Like, I've competed on the world's biggest stages. I've picked myself up from my bootstraps where at a point so low that many people never have to go there. You're going to tell me like that I can't produce the same amount of value as someone else because I think differently or because of X, Y, and Z. Like I was just like, this isn't happening. And then it also really kind of feeling trapped, really, I had like this visceral reaction almost because like my mom was trapped. My mom was relying upon like one person, one source for her economic needs, and we see how well that turned out, right? And so, I mean, obviously a company is a different situation, but I wanted choices and I wanted freedom. So I was like, how am I going to do this, So I looked into like different ways to invest and different things I could do, but I really fell in love with the concept of real estate because I am used to, from being an athlete for so long, used to like that long-term strategic vision, used to working really hard, especially in the beginning when you don't know what's going to pan out, but just like believing in it and doubling down, you know? And so that's really for me, like what real estate is. You know, I spent like 2 years studying, 2 years saving before I purchased anything. And the hardest parts are like finding the deal, finding the property, you know, like getting it rehabbed, getting it fixed up. There's so many ways in which it could go wrong. It's understanding like the story behind the asset and how to maximize that story so that you can have the returns that you need to build a successful business. So I really, really loved all of that. And then at some point I need to chill, you know, like I've been working so hard. I'm going to be 35 this month, but I feel like I've been working for like 60 years. Like having to give up my whole life for like my career. And even now, like I've always had like basically 2 jobs since leaving the sport. So I like the concept of being able to build this portfolio and then kind of chilling out a little bit and reaping the rewards of like a semi-passive income stream. So that's kind of what I'm working on and where I'm at right now.
That is awesome. Just the idea of like that passive income coming in, and like if you had to give advice to somebody who was maybe considering becoming an investor or getting an investment property, what would be like 3 things that you'd recommend that they do?
Ooh, 3. Okay. 1, educate yourself. So like there's a lot to know. There's different ways to invest. There's different strategies, different niches. So like I would get a broad understanding of the different opportunities. The second thing is to spend time alone and really figure out what you want out of this. There's a quote, begin with the end in mind, Stephen Covey. And I think really understanding what you want your life to look like in the future will drive investment decisions now so that you can build that bridge from point A to point B. So that's super important. And then I think the third would be to understand money. So like a lot of people want to get into real estate investing, but they don't have money. Investing is for discretionary income after you've taken care of all of your needs. So learn how money works, learn to save, understand how much you have coming in, understand what your savings rate is, how much you have going out. And that can help you understand what you can afford and what you can take on. You know, it really needs to be strategic. So like take that time to figure out those pieces to be successful.
And would you say that like once you got your first property, was it easy to get the next one, or did it still take a ton of like, okay, now I have this property, I got to make sure I know how I'm doing this and get it right, and then it's like, okay, now I want to do another one? And I feel like I looked this up, or you told me now you have 9 properties.
Yeah. Well,
that's a lot of property.
Well, I have 6 properties, but 3 are duplexes. So like I have like 9 rental units. Yeah. So yes and no. There's some like economies of scale that kind of translate. So like the process stays the same, but then each property is a little different. So you might have to do something different with it. And then like you have contacts from your first one that you can apply to the next one, but not always 100%, you know? So some of it does apply. But I think the hardest thing is like the mentality, because going into the first one, I'm like, okay, I've saved X amount of money. This is more money than I've ever seen in my entire life. And I'm basing it all off of what people say on the internet. What did I do to end up here? You know, like it was all based on like kind of abstract and totally theoretical knowledge. It gets easier internally once you take that step and it is successful and you're like, wait a second, I'm not an idiot. Hold up. You know, and you're like, oh, this actually works. And then you have the confidence. So it's really like the internal change that can really make it easier, I think.
You're getting me excited about potentially investing.
Yes. That is my goal. I love it.
And within your company, is it kind of talk about like what you do? Do you like also invest just for yourself, or do you invest for other people? Is it like, walk us through a little bit about exactly what you do, and then if people want to like connect with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so it's definitely a mixture. So I purchase properties that are held under my company, and they are typically residential assets, so single families and duplexes up to this point. they are heavily distressed. I have to do the work to rehab them to make sure they are in good condition to live in. Like I do not tolerate any sort of like slumlordy lower level stuff, like that's not in the repertoire at all. And then, yeah, I primarily have them rented out to long-term tenants who live there for several years. And I have a team here who I work with, a property management group, and they are excellent at what they do, So like I'm a big proponent of hiring experts and letting them do their thing, like make sure they know more than me and that they are just as hungry as I am, So for the different pieces, I haven't yet built an internal team for all of this because I'm still growing. I'd rather put my funds in the properties and then use those funds eventually to grow internally if that's what I want to do. But I found like such good people externally that I'm just like, I'm good. You guys take care of it. And up until last year, it was 100% like my own funds that I used to grow, like off of my one W-2. I scrimped, I saved, I couponed, like did everything I could and would just like put every penny back into the business. A lot of people start with investors more, I think earlier on, but I really wanted to be successful and have a track record and kind of put my money where my mouth is, and build that up on my own. So I bootstrapped that. Now I'm at a point where like this year I took on my first investor back in February. I exited him, I think a month or so ago, and he was very happy with the way things kind of turned out with his returns and everything else. So I'm definitely taking on more investors. I'm going to start investing again next year. I just purchased a duplex like 2 months ago. So I'm kind of like chilling and like doing the renovation on that, so I'm not like actively investing right now, but like starting next year, I'll kick that back up again. But yeah, so it's definitely evolving to grow and to make sure that I can kind of set up these win-win situations so that my company grows. But then also in kind of like we're in like more tumultuous economic times, and it's really good to diversify, so being able to provide people with a win-win situation for them where I can provide them returns, et cetera, no matter how, and I set up the deal so that no matter how I perform, they still win, So I do work with some investors to kind of help them and set that up for them.
That's super exciting. How can people find out about this? Like where should they go to connect with you, get a hold of you? Is there like a website they can go to? Anything like
Yeah. So I have a website, and then also I'm relatively active on my business Instagram. So like my website is Griffix Property Group. That is GRIFFIX propertygroup.com. And then my Instagram, it goes by the same handle, Griffix Property Group.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm just so excited that we've had this conversation. I feel like we've learned so much about you, about your background, about how many things you overcome. And I'm just excited to see like what's next for you, because it seems like you're just going up, and I want to have you back on a year from now to talk about everything that's happened in the next year.
I would love to. I like talking to you. So anytime you want to talk, I'm here.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Sunitha, for being on here. And until next time, thank you.
Thank you.
Nice.